How's it going, friends? Thank you for tuning in to VR Revelations once again. Welcome. It is January 20th, 2023, and it is currently 9:33 p.m. So let's jump right into it. Just a quick reminder, make sure you give the video a like and make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can get notifications whenever I drop more of these videos. Anyways, so we had a meeting here between high-ranking officials of the German government and the United States, along with Ukraine. Everybody was expecting a major announcement here and a decision by the Germans to give the green light to their Leopard 2 tanks, which Ukraine has been desperately asking for, like urgently, right? And all these nations have been putting pressure on the Germans to allow for those tanks to be sent and deployed in Ukraine, but Germany has been very hesitant, and they've been asking for reassurances from the United States. Specifically, they say they want the United States to also allow their Abrams tanks to be sent. The United States has been coming up with a whole bunch of excuses. They say that it just doesn't make sense logistically for the United States to send these tanks all the way across the world into Ukraine. It would just be a nightmare logistically. On top of that, they would have to keep resupplying the ammunition for these tanks, which again, the logistics would be a nightmare. And they've also said these tanks are really difficult to maintain and to repair, and so that would also be a very difficult situation since all these parts, I guess, have to be sent from the United States over to Ukraine. I've seen that they've said that by the time they get there, winter might be over, and so it'll be difficult to drive these things in that terrain over there. And so it looks like the United States isn't going to be sending their Abrams tanks, the focus now is on Germany. The Ukrainians, everybody is pressuring them, but Germany continues to refuse, and there are all these reasons for it. But really what it comes down to is that Germany is worried that the images of German tanks versus Russian tanks in Ukraine will sort of awaken a World War II memories in the Russian populace and in the populace of the world. And of course, we know that one of the justifications that Vladimir Putin has put out there for the special military operation is that he is combating Nazis in Ukraine, or this Nazi ideology, and that he is trying to liberate the Russian-speaking people there in Ukraine because, of course, they've been discriminated against by all these anti-Russian laws that Zelensky's government has passed. And so, can you imagine how much support Vladimir Putin would get from the populace if he would to go to his people and say, hey, look at these images. The Nazis are in Ukraine already with their tanks, just like in World War II, right? Look at the Germans. Look at these German tanks. What more evidence do you need that this is a continuation of World War II, right? That would just, set the Russian people on fire, and they would probably go all out. Because again, Nazi Germany, as evil as they were one of the most powerful armies in the history of humankind. I would say the most powerful the world has ever seen. And they launched their full force on Russia. And I would say by divine providence, Russia was able to resist that army, and eventually they launched a counteroffensive, and we know what happened next. Hitler, right before the Russians got to him, right in his bunker in Berlin, killed himself, and so they were defeated by the Russians. So this was only about 75 years ago, guys. The World War II ended in 1945. I know a lot of people that are 80, 90 years old. So there's a lot of people that have this memory very vividly in their minds, especially the Russians and especially the Germans. So that's why the Germans don't want to agitate the Russians, because they have a history with them, a very terrible history. except this time the Russians have a massive nuclear arsenal and Germany has none. And so they sort of want the United States to, go in with them and sending their tanks also, so that we just don't see images of German tanks on the battlefield. They want to see American tanks also fighting the Russian tanks. That way, if Russia were to sort of escalate the war and try to attack Germany with, let's say, a small tactical nuke, because of their history, because of World War II, then Germany would sort of feel reassured that, since there are American tanks on the battlefield also, then America would have to come in and help Germany, or at the very least attack Russia with a small tactical nuclear bomb if Russia were to attack Germany. So again, this is all very symbolic, and I don't blame the Germans. Of course, what they did in World War II was atrocious, and they've pretty much been the cause or at the center here of the last two world wars. So I don't blame these leaders for not wanting to start World War III when they lost so terribly to the Russians in World War II. But again, Zelensky, all these other governments are putting pressure on them, so it's going to be very interesting to see if they buckle under all these pleas. But anyways, that announcement was expected here. Of course, it wasn't made, but we did have United States Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin travel there. As you can see here in this picture, it's this man right up here on the right. He is literally second in authority of the Army, only to the President of the United States, Joe Biden. So, this was a very important meeting. We also had General Mark Miley of the United States Army, who is an advisor to the Secretary and to the President. Now, they did say they were going to send some other stuff like artillery units and infantry vehicles, as we're about to read here. But before we read, let's take a quick look at a little piece of commentary here from this press conference they held there in Germany.
And there's on your first question, typically we're not going to discuss, I don't discuss either prohibitions or permissions, authorities on the use of weapons, etc. That goes towards rules of engagement. We don't typically discuss those in a public forum. On the second question, President Biden, President Zelensky, and most of the leaders of Europe have said that this war is likely to end in a negotiation, and from a military.
Wait, what? Wait, I thought, the only way for this war to end was the elimination of Vladimir Putin and the tyrannical government in Russia. So now he's saying that this is going to end at the negotiating table. Later on, he does say that those negotiations can only come about if Ukraine retains its former territories. So he sort of backtracks. Again, they're just living in fantasy land if they think Ukraine is going to get Crimea back and all of the other territories that Russia has literally now declared are part of Russia. I think what's going to happen here in the next couple of months is that Zelensky is probably going to get out of Dodge, if you know what I mean.
Military standpoint, this is a very, very difficult fight. This fight stretches all the way from right now, so the front line goes from all the way from Kharkiv down to Kherson, and there's significant fighting ongoing, and it's more or less a static front line right this minute, with the exception of Bakhmut and Soledar, where there's significant
Yeah, so the Russians aren't making advances with the exception of literally like two of the most important cities right now, Soledar, which the Russians now control, and Bakhmut, which they're about to take control, which is going to initiate a major collapse of the Ukrainian forces.
Offensive action going on really from both sides. The distance, that for the United States, that's about from, I guess, Washington, D.C. to Atlanta. So that is a significant amount of territory. And in that territory are still remaining a lot of Russian forces in Russian-occupied Ukraine. So from a military standpoint, I still maintain that for this year, it would be very, very difficult to militarily eject the Russian forces.
Notice how he said for this year, like sort of insinuating that, the Ukrainians will eventually push the Russians back, but that'll probably have to be next year or the year after. No, I think Russia's probably going to deal the death blow this year.
From every inch of Ukrainian occupied or Russian occupied Ukraine. That doesn't mean it can't happen, doesn't mean it won't happen, but it'd be very, very difficult. I think what can happen is a continued defense, stabilizing the front. I think it's possible to clearly do that. And I think it's depending on the delivery and training of all of this equipment, I do think it's very, very possible for the Ukrainian.
Notice that their tone and their outlook for the situation is growing less and less optimistic, as we've been hearing for the last couple of months, with all this Western media propaganda that Ukraine is holding strong, that they are having victories on the battlefield, when really they've been fighting a defensive war pretty much throughout the whole year now that this conflict has been going on. But now, as we see these revelations here at these press conferences that the United States and Germany aren't willing to go all in, we start to see them sort of, downplaying the possibility of an absolute victory on the part of the Ukrainians. So I think this is just going to cause more demoralization for the Ukrainian army.
Means to run a significant tactical or even operational level offensive operation to liberate as much Ukrainian territory as possible. And then we'll see where it goes. But I do think at the end of the day, this war, like many wars in the past, will end at some sort of negotiating table. And that'll be determined in terms of timing by the leaders of both countries, both Russia and Ukraine. President Putin could end this war today. He started it. It's his war of choice, and he could end it today.
Yeah, he's right about that, but Zelensky already said he's not willing to talk with Russia until Putin is gone. So, is that really the case? If Vladimir Putin said, "Hey, Zelensky, come to the table, let's sit down and negotiate," does Putin really have the power to negotiate if Zelensky doesn't want to? And if the United States tells him not to sit down? So how true is that statement, right? Not that accurate. Anyways, you can go watch the rest of the press conference there. The big topic was they're not sending tanks. Germany is still refusing to send their tanks because of the symbolic message that it would send to the Russian populace. Again, World War II guys. So let's take a look here at this analysis by this German DW news source or website. So it says Western allies failed to reach a decision on supplying powerful battle tanks to Ukraine at a meeting at the United States Ramstein Air Base in Germany on Friday. Lloyd Austin, the U.S. Defense Secretary, said after the Ukraine Contact Group meeting, Ukraine is not dependent on a single platform. Austin, who hosted the meeting, said allies gave pledges for a large amount of other weapons. What we're really focused on is making sure that Ukraine has the capability that it needs to be successful right now, Austin said. Well, Ukraine is telling you what they need to be successful, and you're giving them other stuff. Germany has been at the center of the tank debate. Ukraine has said it wants German-made Leopard and U.S. M1 Abrams tanks, and they said no. The country's new defense minister, Boris Pistorius, that name is just so funny to me, Boris Pistorius, said Berlin would balance all the pros and cons before we decide things like that. I am very sure that there will be a decision in the short term, but I don't know how the decision will look. Berlin has yet to give the go-ahead to Leopard-owning allies like Poland or Finland. Again, there's other countries that have German tanks, but according to the rules or the agreements, they aren't allowed to re-export them without the German permission. Who desire to send them to Ukraine. Ukraine is running out of personnel. It's running out of weapons. Every day counts. They are bleeding. Roderich Kieswister of Germany's opposition Christian Democrats and former Bundeswehr General Staff Officer told DW. And I believe that the European credibility is dying out, he added. He's correct. And there was also another comment. Some official said that, the Ukrainians were like fighting the Russians with bare knuckles, just showing you how desperately they are in need of this. I mean, Ukraine is literally getting ready to collapse, guys. And I'll be making a video here soon on this rumored large offensive that is supposed to be coming here pretty soon by the Russians. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Kyiv would continue to push for modern heavy armor. Yes, we will still have to fight for the delivery of modern tanks, but every day we make it more obvious that there is no alternative to taking a decision about tanks. Zelensky's literally saying right there that if they don't send the tanks, they're going to collapse. And I've been saying it all along, guys. When push comes to shove, when it comes time to go all in for Ukraine's allies, they are going to back down. And they are going to reveal what their true intentions were, to just take advantage of the situation as long as they could to inflict damage to Russian reserves. But they will show in the end that they were not serious about standing up for Ukraine all the way. They will back down, and they will be embarrassed internationally. We will not, I believe, have a World War III over Ukraine. I do believe we are going to have a World War III later on, because the Bible tells us there has to be an end to the world, but it's not going to be over Ukraine, and Zelensky will be made to look like the clown that, he used to portray on television, and I think he will end up fleeing the country. That's what I think will happen. So, let's continue to read here. It says, Zelensky says Ukraine to continue push for modern tanks. Ukraine's president says it would continue to fight to get battle tanks from its allies. Every day we make it more obvious that there is no alternative to taking a decision about tanks, Volodymyr Zelensky said in an evening video address. Ukraine's allies did not decide whether German-made Leopard 2 battle tanks or U.S. M1 Abrams tanks should be sent to Kyiv. Zelensky said the outcome of the Ramstein meeting would strengthen Ukraine's resilience. Again, even if they were to send a couple of them, it's not going to make a difference. Ukraine literally needs like over 500 tanks to make a small push, or rather resist the Russians. They would literally need thousands to overcome Russia, and at that point Russia would probably resort to small tactical nuclear weapons, and it could potentially escalate to an all-out nuclear war, which again the U.S. is not willing to risk. Neither is Germany, as we're clearly seeing here. Top Democrat on U.S. Armed Services Committee says Germany must be given time. Time for what? Time to think about it more? It is not fair to criticize Germany for taking time to consider whether to give Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. Yeah, it's not fair because you got to remember, Nazi Germany launched an all-out attack on Russia and they were defeated. And Germany doesn't want to send the wrong message and awaken people's memories of that atrocious war by, televising on national TV German tanks versus Russian tanks. He said while Ukraine's allies want Russia defeated, they also don't want a direct conflict. There you go, guys. What else do you need? They don't want a direct conflict. That's it. You can obligate them to fight Ukraine's war. That's just not the way things work. I don't think it's a fair criticism to say that Germany has dragged its feet just because, somebody in the process said, well, you ought to send him that, you ought to send it now, Smith said. There's a calculation that goes into this that a lot of people don't pay attention to, he added. Yeah, when you're in a war, you better calculate everything as meticulously as you can. What is that escalatory point at which it runs a higher risk of getting into that direct conflict? So I think people who just look at this and go, gosh, Germany, they should send them whatever they want, and not even think about it. It's a more difficult calculation than I think a lot of people are willing to admit. Again, a lot of the people that say that are just the average state populace that are literally so brainwashed by political propaganda that they have no clue as to the repercussions of a real war, and don't put any thought into the existence of nuclear weapons. So yeah, you can continue to read on, guys. So pretty much, Ukraine is not going to receive these tanks that it desperately needs, and it seems that Russia is only going to accelerate now their push forward before any such decision is made. So again, there you have it, guys. The truth is stranger than fiction. Anyways, leave me your thoughts and comments down below. Again, make sure you give the video a like and make sure you subscribe for future coverage. Thank you for tuning in. Have a wonderful day and God bless.